We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Not only will this tax plan pay for itself, but it will pay down debt.
There are moral and legal obligation questions that I think we'll have to wrestle with as a society.
When we as people go wobbly on the truth, we go wobbly on America.
All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done.
And this is only the beginning.
Good morning, everyone. You're tuned in to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR in Rochester. My name is Jason Taylor, host of Evidence of Design, and I'm joined in WXIR's studios by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
What's up?
We are a live show. That means it is Saturday, September 4th, 2021. Happy to be here with you on this Labor Day weekend. Matt, happy Labor Day. You're in the workforce right now, so this is all about you.
Yeah, I speak for working people when I say we need more holidays.
Do you agree, working people out there, that we need more days off? I'm not working right now, so this is not a holiday about me and Matt. You and all of the other workers out there, thank you for your labor. Thank you for keeping this country running. I'm not good for anything because I'm not in the labor force right now, so I'm just sucking off of I'm like a bat, a blood-sucking bat, just leeching off of your labor. So thank you for keeping this country going while I just sit back and play a bunch of video games.
It's comforting to finally hear somebody put it so candidly.
Yeah, I mean, for all those who don't work out there, I know you feel exactly the same as I do. I'm kidding, folks. Sarcasm. Really, happy Labor Day. We'll talk a little bit about that, but let me put on the serious hat and say thanks for being here and listening to our show, Evidence of Design. What we talk about is income and wealth inequality. There's way too much economic inequality in society. We investigate its causes, critique its effects, and propose some ways that we think can make our society more equal, mainly economically, but also, hey, economics impacts everything, so it would trickle along with social and political equality as well. Again, too much economic inequality in society, we figure out where it comes from and what we can do about it. Thanks for being here. On today's show, we're going to talk about something very local to us in Rochester, New York. We just learned yesterday at a Board of Education meeting for the Rochester City School District that the Rcsd may be pushing back the start date for its school year by one day. So school was supposed to start next Wednesday. It may start next Thursday, September 9th now. And perhaps more importantly for folks, high school students may be going to school virtually for at least the start of the school year, the end date to be determined of that virtual segment, because of a bus driver shortage. That is big news that families in the Rcsd found out about yesterday. We're going to talk about that on today's show. What's going on with the bus driver shortage, what the Rcsd is proposing, and how that might impact folks in Rochester going forward. We, of course, would love to hear from you throughout the hour because, hey, this probably impacts you. If it does, we want to hear. 585-219-8889, 585-219-8889. We're also on Facebook at Radio EOD. Of course, that stands for Radio Evidence of Design. 585-219-8889. 8889 as well. Would you be impacted if the RCSD went to virtual learning for high school students? Would you be impacted by a start date being pushed back by 1 day? What are your thoughts? We want to hear from you. We'll get into probably some more things in the later half of the hour as well, including money being appropriated, $4 million to be specific, for revitalization of the northern interloop in Rochester. Of course, the eastern part of the former interloop was filled in, and now they put a bunch of apartment buildings on it. And so we'll talk about what might happen for the northern interloop as well later on in the hour. We're going to take a very short break, though, and before we get into the RCSD's potential proposal to have virtual learning for high school students because of a bus driver shortage. Hang on.
Alice Cooper with School's Out.
This is Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. Sorry, kids. School is the opposite of what's going on in that song. I think school's back in time for the fall. I don't, normally you would say womp womp, but I don't know. Do students want to be back in school nowadays? Like, because of all, being virtual for so long, do students sort of really desire that social connection and in-person intimacy? I have no idea. I'm not a youth.
I'm a student of the world.
And
I can take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. Yeah, I mean, whenever you talk about anything education, the answer is there are people on all sides, because everyone goes through the educational system in one way or another, and people have different opinions. So, yeah, I'm just genuinely curious. Again, that's what we'd love to hear from you throughout the hour. 585-219-8889. Matt, let's talk about what came to light yesterday. That's Friday, September 3rd, at a board meeting for the Rochester City School District. At the board meeting, it was made apparent, and there was trickling of announcements hours and if not even a day before then, that the RCSD was considering having high school students start the school year with virtual learning. That means they would not be going to school in person. That is a big deal because the Rochester City School District had been talking for months, literal months, at least since January of this year, that we want all students back in school in person. As soon as it's safe, as soon as it's feasible. Back in January, it was like the as soon as it's safe thing because COVID was rampant and vaccines weren't readily available then. Now, vaccines are readily available for free. Walk to your nearest insert store here, and you can get one of your insert vaccine here for COVID-19.
Please.
Right, please, for free. It's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. And so vaccines are readily available. So safety thing, not saying that safety is not a concern. Of course, COVID is still out there with Delta. But, more folks are vaccinated. And as a society, we've, I guess, whether right or wrong, come to accept the fact that COVID will just be around. And we're going to have to live with it somehow. So now, beyond the safety concern, the RCSD was saying, look, we're losing a lot of students. Students are struggling with virtual learning. We need to have folks in person because in-person learning provides the best results. So they were talking for months that they were going to have in-person learning, and then to announce literally 4 work days before the first day of school that high school students would start virtual learning, that is a big deal. Because if you're in a family, how do you suddenly plan to have your kid or kids be home? Learning from home. How do you do that? If you work a job, et cetera, right? That requires social movement that isn't as simple as sort of telling something to happen, right? This has consequences socially because the education system is such a socially embedded institution that affects people's lives and organizes it. So that is a big deal. Now, there had been sort of indications of issues going on with the start of the school year for a number of reasons. We'll specifically talk about the bus driver shortage. 3 weeks ago, the RCSD staggered the start times for its schools because of a bus driver shortage. So there weren't enough bus drivers, and so in order to get students to schools, to their buildings so they can learn in person. They staggered the start times for school. There was essentially 3 different start times for schools across the RCSD. That was the plan, inconvenient, that already perhaps inconvenienced folks, or maybe it helped folks by having later start times. Some schools are starting at 9 or 9:30, I think. That might be a good thing for people. So that was sort of the plan until yesterday when the RCSD said, look, even more bus drivers have quit since then. And so we simply don't have enough drivers to even fulfill their staggered start time schedule. We're just going to have buses for elementary and middle school students, that's pre-K through 8, and then high school students will have to learn virtually if we can't get more bus drivers or find another solution. That's what was announced yesterday. Also, that the school day, the starting school day is postponed by 1 day. Instead of being next Wednesday, September 8th, it is now proposed to be Thursday, September 9th. Some members of the Board of Education last night at the meeting, 3 of them, called for the school year to be postponed in starting for 2 weeks until they can figure out how to get all students into school. So they're saying, no. High school students are not going to learn virtually. We're going to postpone the start of the school year by 2 weeks, and hopefully by then we can figure something out to give all students the opportunity to learn in person. It's not apparent that there's a solution for that right now, and so the board adjourned without sort of voting on anything official yet, without setting on a very specific policy yet. But as of now, it seems like the most likely plan would be for the school year to start on Thursday as opposed to Wednesday, and for high school students to learn virtually. But of course, we'll have to stay in tune to local media sources and the RCSD's website itself to see the latest announcements. I believe that school principals were tasked with reaching out to families this weekend to see, how is it going to happen? Is your child going to be bused to school? Are they not? In the case of high school, and would you be able to drive them yourselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot going on with the start of the school year here in Rochester, and we'll have to see how it plays out. The noteworthy thing is that this is not just plaguing Rochester. This is something that's happening all across the country with bus driver shortages. This week, perhaps most noticeably in Chicago, one of the largest school districts in the country, folks there had to, cancel bus services for a lot of students.
It was just after they canceled 70% or 10% of the bus drivers working.
Yes. So this is a funny story. I was hesitating a little bit. So what happened in Chicago is there was a mandate brought down by the school district, I believe, maybe the state, I'm not sure, but there was a mandate that, school bus drivers and other school folks had to get a vaccine for COVID-19. If you want to work in the school district, you got to have a vaccine for COVID-19. Well, some bus drivers weren't into that. So 70 bus drivers quit. That's 10% of the bus driver workforce, and therefore not enough bus drivers in Chicago to bus students to all the schools that they need. So, bus driver shortage in Chicago, bus driver shortages all across the country, though, including here in Rochester. Indeed, the National School Transportation Association, they conducted a survey of different school districts across the country, 1,500 responses, and they found that every region across the country is facing transportation service disruption. So not necessarily every school district, but every region. It's not just the Northeast, it's not just the South, etc. They found that 51% of respondents said their bus driver shortage is severe or desperate. They found that 50%, so half of respondents, said bus driver pay is the main difficulty for recruiting and retaining bus drivers. Bus driver shortages are not something new and unexperienced for districts. It happens, but what's new now is just how widespread the shortage of bus drivers is and how deep the shortage is. That's what's new and unique here. And that is affecting, of course, manifested here in Rochester and Chicago and beyond. We're talking, of course, about the bus driver shortage in Rochester and also the RCSD's tentative proposal to have high school students learn virtually on evidence of design on 100.9 FM WXIR. We'd love to hear from you. Are you affected by this change? What are your thoughts about busing and the start of the school year this year? You can let us know. 585-219-8889. Again, that's 585-219-8889. Matt, this is so significant, I think, this potential to start the school year virtually for high school students in the RCSD, because that would mean that Rochester City School District high schoolers would be the only students, only high schoolers in particular, across the entire county of all 18 school districts there are in Monroe County to have an involuntary option, right? It's not an option if it's involuntary, to have an involuntary mandate essentially to not learn in person. That means RCSD high schoolers would be the only students in Monroe County to not have an option to do in-person learning. Why does that matter? Of course, because RCSD students are often systemically disadvantaged. And this would be one way, again, that RCSD students are disadvantaged in a way that suburban students are not having an option for in-person learning. So it's just another manifestation of systemic disadvantage and raises a lot of questions about, well, what can we do to get these students to school? The RCSD had sent out messages and sort of polls a little earlier this week to ask if parents would be able to provide their own transportation for their kids to school. Indeed, this is something that's happening in Chicago right now in their bus driver shortage, where the district and the superintendent are asking if parents can drive their own kids to school, if they can, and the district would reimburse them. They're even thinking about paying parents to transport their kids to school, or partnering with Uber and Lyft, the ride-sharing companies, to provide transportation as well, and providing funding for that. Matt, you're grimacing a little bit. What's wrong with having private ride-sharing companies, Uber and Lyft, transport our wee youth to school?
Oh, nothing. I think it's the future, probably.
I think you're right on that we will just slowly privatize and externalize all aspects of public society and services off to private companies, particularly those in the gig economy, where, oh yeah, you want to get educated, just hire your teacher through, whatever one-word zinger kitschy name you can have in Silicon Valley tech companies. So yeah, I mean, hopefully the Uber and Lyft scenario is not going to be the permanent solution, but it's a proposed solution right now, at least in Chicago. I don't hear that happening here in New York and in Rochester. And I think, I've been following this a little bit on social media, particularly Justin Murphy, the education reporter through Democrat and Chronicle, seen somewhere in one of many threads that perhaps it's not allowed because in New York you have to be so-and-so certified to professionally drive students to school. You can't just be a random Joe Schmo driving students into the school, right? For safety reasons. So let's talk a little bit about this bus driver shortage, because it also ties into Labor Day, Matt, just how we started our show, to all of those laborers out there. What's going on with these bus drivers? Why can't we all just be collectively angry at them? This lack of bus drivers, don't they care about the kids and parents, Matt? Why are they holding everyone up because they don't want to do their job as bus drivers? What gives with these people, right? Sarcasm here. But really, what's going on with the bus driver shortage? Well, there are lots of potential reasons for it. I'm not saying I know exactly what's going on, but here's some potential causes. Matt, what is going on then?
Well, as longtime listeners will know, I'm actually an expert on buses. I was born on a bus, actually. I spent an extensive amount of time with Tom Wolfe in the 60s on Further. Yeah, just a wealth of experience and knowledge when it comes to buses, bus schedules, bus manufacturers.
You had a lot of Hot Wheels.
City
when you were
ones,
kids.
school ones,
Only
yellow
buses.
ones, blue ones. The ones that have like the little thing in the middle that makes it super long. Double deckers. Yeah.
So you have a lot of knowledge with buses. That's great.
Yep.
What are some of the reasons why some bus drivers? Why is there a shortage?
I mean, well, I only know about buses, Jason. I don't actually know anything about people who drive them.
The labor market of them. Well, there are potential causes going on here. One of them is that many bus drivers, of course, were furloughed or laid off during COVID-19. When there was sort of mandated virtual learning going on, bus drivers not needed so much, right? So districts either furloughed, meaning temporarily laid off, or permanently laid off bus drivers. And so now there's been a lot of work trying to get bus drivers back into the labor market working for districts. And that has caused potentially some of this widespread, deep, and severe bus driver shortage of having to reintegrate bus drivers back into the labor market. Another potential cause is a lot of bus drivers might have moved on from the field or retired out of the labor force. So if you are furloughed or laid off from your job, you might start looking for other jobs, right? Because why would you stick with this thing that you've given yourself over to and had been sort of, I don't want to say punished, but, have a negative experience happen to you in your job that you've given yourself over to help out for a while. So if you're laid off, you might, of course, be more inclined to look for other lines of work where you think you will experience less disruption and more security in your future. Or maybe you'll leave the labor force entirely. Bus drivers, I don't know the demographic statistics of bus drivers, but thinking of when I was younger, many of my bus drivers were older people. They were older folks. And so maybe a lot of folks retired from the bus driving service entirety. And so the simple labor force of bus drivers has shrunk. That is another potential cause. Another potential cause is that perhaps bus drivers are wary of their safety, especially if they are older folks or just anyone in general, wary of their safety on buses because of COVID-19. You're, of course, trapped in this little vehicle with lots of other people who potentially are vectors for COVID-19. And we know that kids aged, I believe, 12 and under, maybe 11 and under, I'm not sure the exact age, but youth are unable yet to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So bus drivers who would be wary of catching COVID might not feel safe doing their job on a bus. And so they might be looking for other lines of work. On the flip side, Matt, we have the story out of Chicago where you have bus drivers who are wary of so there's safety concerns about COVID.
There's safety concerns about the vaccine as well, as people will know,
Right.
Virus shedding and cell phone towers.
Right. So on the one hand, there are safety concerns about catching COVID, and then on the other hand, there are people who have safety concerns about the COVID-19 vaccine. Those people, I don't agree with, and I question their ability to discern reliable information from less reliable pieces of information. Let's just put it that way. And so what we saw in Chicago with 10% of the bus driving workforce quitting because they didn't want to get the COVID-19 vaccine, well, I guess some folks are also leaving the bus driving force because of safety concerns about COVID-19 vaccine, as opposed to, I guess, the disease itself, which, what's the old saying that the disease is, or the cure is worse than the disease? Not sure that fits in this case, but, and these folks' own mind palace, I guess it does.
I was zoning in and out there, so I don't know if you brought this up at all, but NPR quoted or cited salary.com as reporting that the median school bus driver earns about $35,000 a year, which varies depending on region, of course. But I'd just like to point out that something that I feel like is so often dismissed in everyday conversation that I happen to overhear but not take part in because, well, we won't get into that. But I hear it often said, people complaining about how ever since COVID, people don't want to work anymore. Unemployment is too generous and it's disincentivizing people to get out and actually work. And I don't often hear it said enough that, there are so many jobs and positions which our society depends upon that are, in my opinion, criminally underpaid. And so $35,000 a year is not a lot. I don't even know if that's like enough to live on in Rochester. Certainly not in the suburbs. And I just think that, my sort of feeling on this is always to be sort of incredulous or skeptical of why so many positions, so many jobs in our society that we depend upon are so undervalued, both monetarily and culturally.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Bus drivers don't make a whole heck of a lot of money. The median wage, the median salary, I should say, the median income you cited from what NPR cited, around $35,000. That's not a whole heck of a lot of money, right? I don't know how many hours that equates to, whether that's 40 hours a week in a job, or bus drivers, I think, often don't work 40 hours a week. Maybe it's part-time, 30 hours, 20 hours. I don't know. But, that sort of matters, whether it's $35,000 a year for 20 hours of work a week, in which case that's not too bad, or whether it's 40 hours of work a week, which is pretty awful, right? Because you're right. I mean, how do you live off of $35,000 a year? How do you pay rent on a comfortable place to live, or, buy your own home? How do you have your own transportation in the form of a car? How do you have reliable health care and are able to keep up the latest consumer electronics and have clothes and food and able to take vacation? I mean, how do you do that with $35,000 a year? The point is, it's not easy.
And I also would just like to point out real quick that anybody who's ever worked a part-time job will understand that just because something is part-time doesn't mean that it doesn't keep a rigid schedule. And like finding part-time jobs that sort of like accommodate one another is very difficult. And again, like maybe bus drivers aren't working 40 hours a week. It's still a job that is very important to the functioning of society, and doesn't mean that like they necessarily have time or even energy or should be expected to work elsewhere and just to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. I mean, it's not bus drivers' fault that they would work 30 hours a week, right? Or 20 hours a week. That's the nature of the position that's been designed by the human resources department, the executives in the companies, or school districts, so on and so forth. There are many reasons why someone would work a part-time job. Maybe they're studying in college, right? Maybe they're taking care of a family member. Maybe they just don't want to work full-time at the moment, or maybe they're trying to figure out what else they can do, what to pursue to work full time. There are many reasons.
Maybe they're old.
Yeah, maybe they're older. Maybe they can't work full time. Right? There are so many reasons why someone doesn't work 40 hours a week. And by the way, just because you don't work 40 hours a week, which is a totally arbitrary number, right? There's no scientific reason to say that we need 40 hours of work a week, full as we would define it in our modern 2021st century or year. Society, 40 hours of work a week is a full-time job. That's an arbitrary number that we've decided. We can change that number whenever we want if we feel like it, and I think we should. Right? We should all be working less, I think, because we can maintain a level of productivity. In fact, we can probably even increase our productivity, I believe, if we work less. And therefore, when we're talking about, you work part-time, I mean, that's fine. You're doing your job, right? So bus drivers, if you're a bus driver, I don't think you need to have another job just because you're not reaching a 40-hour work week number, right? But the point is, whatever you're doing for your labor, that should hopefully make your ends meet. There's been tons of articles recently locally. A lot of restaurants can't find servers. A lot of retail stores can't find clerks, can't find bus drivers. I mean, these are just jobs in society that tend to not be as rewarding as other jobs, as actual careers, so-called.
And of course, you have the added I don't know how to put this, but we're living in a pandemic right now, and so people who work in jobs that have a lot of interaction with the public, especially bus drivers who are working with a population that often can't be vaccinated right now because of the age limit, they're putting their health on the line. And, just because even if you do have the vaccine, it doesn't guarantee that you won't get COVID. In fact, the whole point of having a vaccine is to get multiple people vaccinated so that you can build herd immunity. It's not like it's just a firewall that automatically prevents you from getting the disease.
Yeah. And so the point of us saying all of these things about part-time work and the value of pay and the value of recognizing someone's labor is not just, hey, Labor Day's on Monday, but to recognize that the reason why there are bus driver shortages can be many and varied. We've mentioned that many have potentially been laid off or furloughed from COVID-19 and virtual learning over the past year. Many might have safety concerns about catching COVID-19. Unfortunately, in the case of 10% of bus drivers in Chicago, those folks had safety concerns about getting the COVID-19 vaccine. And then, of course, as mentioned in this National School Transportation Association survey of bus driver groups and school districts across the country, the plurality of responses around why school districts are having a tough time getting adequate staffing for bus drivers is that 50% of respondents, a plurality, said that their main difficulty is recruiting and retaining bus drivers because of pay. Again, the median wage for bus drivers, the median total income for bus drivers, I keep mixing up wage, salary, income, all that stuff. $35,000 a year, median income for bus drivers. Not too much, $35,000 a year. Let's take a look at some specific postings for bus drivers, though. So the Rcsd right now, newsflash, they're hiring bus drivers. So if you need a job and if you want to be a bus driver, they're hiring, of course. And right on their website, Rcsd Careers webpage, they're hiring bus drivers. 10 months. So it's not 12-month jobs, not over the summer. They're 10-month positions for bus drivers, 30 hours a week, at a salary range they know of $20 and around 50 cents an hour to around $22.50 an hour. So $20 to $22 an hour essentially is the salary range at 30 hours a week, 10 months a year. What would you do as a bus driver? Well, here are the lists of responsibilities. You'll drive a school bus on a regular schedule on an assigned route or special occasions. You'll perform a pre-trip inspection of your vehicle and a post-trip inspection after every route. You'll report all defects, mechanical and other, to your supervisor. You'll instruct and inform passengers about safety practices and procedures. You'll maintain safe and orderly conduct on the bus vehicle. You'll assist passengers in boarding and exiting the vehicle. You'll clean and refuel the vehicle daily. And you'll operate other transport objects as needed. So, as a bus driver, you'll drive students, to and from school. And you'll have to maintain the safety of the operation of your vehicle and maintain, a safe trip and make sure everything is orderly. That is for Rcsd bus driver posting for a 10-month bus driver. It's interesting they also have a posting for a substitute bus driver. That is 40 hours a week, so that's a full-time job. That's more hours a week than the actual non-substitute bus driver, but it's for much less pay. It's only for $16.50 an hour. So that's kind of weird to me. Maybe it's 40 hours max if you're a sub bus driver and you would just sort of fill in as needed. So it's more hours for less pay as listed for the sub bus driver. Sorry, that's not a great deal.
No, that's quite the deal. That's how deals are made.
So I'm not sure quite what's going on there. But the problem is, to be a bus driver, you also have to have a commercial driver's license, right? You have to be able to drive a bus, which has hydraulic brakes and all that stuff. So you also need to find sort of certified and trained people to do this work. I don't know if training will be provided on the job or if you'll have to have that certification beforehand. But right now, the RCSD has postings for bus drivers. We should note, though, that it's not like the RCSD themselves have bus drivers. We could have an entire episode on the history of busing and transportation in Rochester and the Rochester City School District. I'm going to butcher the facts, so I don't want to go too deep into them at all. But long story short, some students in the RCSD are transported by yellow buses. That tends to be the company called First Student. And other students in the RCSD have been transported by RTS buses, meaning, the general sort of public transportation service around. So it's typically those are the companies that are facing the shortages, not necessarily intrinsically in the RCSD itself, I believe. But let's turn our attention to a caller now. Thanks for giving us a ring on Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. You should be on the air. Hello, what's on your mind?
Hey, fellas, Aaron from Queens here. How's it going?
Hey, Aaron from Queens. Thanks for giving us a ring. What's up?
So you guys are talking about bus drivers and the shortage and everything today, and I heard you guys talking a little bit ago about whether they were working a 40-hour work week and whether even that should be, I think you were sort of touching on this, whether a 40-hour work week should be the standard by which we decide whether people deserve, a living wage and like to be able to survive and meet their basic needs and, maybe even like go out to eat once in a while to enjoy their life to whatever extent they can. And I don't know. I just think that that's as you were talking about, it's very arbitrary. And there's just so many studies coming out now talking about how that's not even what is the best way. It's not even we know it's not the best for the employees, but it's not even the best for employers. I had a couple pieces of information of studies queued up here that I wanted to mention real quick, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So there was a study in Iceland, 2015 to 2019, followed 2,500 government workers and let them work 35 hours instead. And the ones who work 35 hours, for example, in the accountant department, they processed 6.5% more invoices once they started working fewer hours, and they didn't affect the number of cases closed. And so therefore their productivity remained the same or even improved. And then there was a recent study from Microsoft Japan where they allowed all their 2,300 employees in Microsoft Japan to choose flexible work hours, basically, aka working 20% fewer hours. And the results were workers were happier and there was 40% gain in productivity. So even for the capitalist class, even for the Bill Gateses and the Jeff Bezoses out there, if you want more productivity out of your workers, you have them work fewer hours. And this 40-hour thing is just sort of an arbitrary compromise that was settled on a long time ago from, the late industrial revolution when social movements were gaining traction and, there was an actual threat of socialism and especially in the U.S., the big rise of Eugene Debs and everything like that. It's settled on you'll have Saturday and Sunday off, and we really can, thank the leftist and socialist movements in the country for even giving us that. Otherwise, I'm sure, we'd be working pretty much every day, pretty much always on the clock, or, if the companies had their way, we'd be living in company dorms, eating in company cafeterias, earning company script and can only be spent in company stores. I mean, that's sort of the capitalist dream, isn't it? The anarcho-capitalist dream. But yeah, this 40-hour work week needs to go away. It's outdated. I bet you that office workers, especially in the bigger cities, they're not working those 40 hours. They're just hanging out there. You might know somebody very, very close to you guys who has a very similar experience to that. And, it's well, why are we just pretending then? Why are we making everybody pretend? And then for the workers who actually do have, actual jobs that actually, contribute something to society or at least keep the wheels turning, like, the bus drivers you've been talking about today, the warehouse workers, these people in Iceland, the government workers, whatever, have them work less, and then you'll have better results from them, and you'll have a healthier society overall. But the thing is, that's not really, and I know there's really not any individual pulling the strings and making decisions like this, but it really does benefit the capitalist class and the very ultra rich to have like people working as much as they can for as little as possible, and just even if it's not the most productive thing, if people are just tired out and they don't care, they don't get involved in politics, they don't get involved in social movements and making efforts to improve their life, they basically just go home tired at the end of the day. They want to sit down, order delivery food, watch movies, just basically consume, because with whatever money you have, you pump that back into the economy just to, squeeze out whatever little enjoyment you can from your very hard life. And so obviously if you keep people trapped in this, cycle of constant work and just, a little bit of rest and relaxation, just to keep people from, I guess, just wanting to opt out of the whole thing entirely, which we are seeing increasingly in COVID times, then, that's definitely what benefits the stability of our existing system the most, more than anything.
Yeah, I agree with all of those points, Aaron. Of course, recognizing the benefits that we have experienced as a society in the United States from leftist, socialist, if not even communist movements at the start of the 20th century, fighting for more workers' rights and what we enjoy today, quote, enjoy as a 40-hour work week as a standard. It used to be a lot more. And there are reasons why you're mentioning that I agree with, why the 40-hour work week has sort of retained its hegemony on regulating our lives, because even if you're not doing 40 hours of work a week, as no one in an office does that I know of, right? You go to work for 40 hours a week. You have to be there for 40 hours a week, but no one works 40 hours a week. You spend half the time chatting with your colleagues or browsing Facebook or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there's antiquated systems here that should be changed. And you've mentioned studies that indeed, even if we do work less, it's better, of course, for workers because you get more of your life to spend on things that are meaningful to you as opposed to your meaningless job. But it's also even better for owners, companies, because there's still more productivity that happens even if you work less hours. I want to ask Aaron, I don't know if you know this, but you're calling in from Queens, New York City. New York City is the largest school district in the United States. Are there bus driver shortages there? Or, I don't know, you got better public transportation than, say, Rochester. You got a subway system and, a bus line. Do you know of bus driver shortages in New York?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't really follow local news. I also, as you know, I have no plans on ever having kids, so I don't really follow educational news that closely. I know everything's really screwed up, and I know our schools are in big trouble, and everything across the board, from the classrooms to the funding to the lunches to the bus drivers. But I'm like, well, that sounds like somebody else's problem.
What sounds cool, though, so your subways were underwater recently because of Hurricane Ida.
They were, yeah.
I don't mean to make light of this because, well, people died, and many of those who died are living on the marginalized society in a capitalist system, living in illegal basements.
Yeah, illegal basement apartment.
Yeah,
a 2-year-old boy, actually, in Woodside, the neighborhood where I live in Queens, drowned in a basement apartment because of Ida.
Yeah, that's absolutely awful. But to sort of be cheeky, when your subways were underwater, I'm just picturing kind of like when you go into an aquarium as a kid and you're sort of going through this hallway. You're in a cylinder hallway with water above and around you, and there's like fish swimming around. Like, I don't know if somehow we could design the New York City subway system to just be an aquarium-like tunnel system, that would be pretty sweet.
That would be very cool. Yes. So, the problem though was the water was inside the tunnel, not outside of it. Yeah, you were the aquarium exhibit recently.
Yeah, someone's got to figure that out.
Yes.
Well,
yes. Cool.
Aaron, thanks for calling in. As always, wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Anyone else who wants to share your thoughts with us on Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR as we talk about the bus driver shortage locally in Rochester and nationally, and the Rcsd's tentative proposal to have high school students start the school year learning virtually because there's not enough bus drivers to transport them to and from school. We'd love to hear from you. 585-219-8889, 585-219-8889. 889. You can also reach us on Facebook at Radio EOD. Our post about today's show, Matt, reached 2 people. So that's pretty big. That's bigly stuff right there. I don't know how many people are even hearing us right now. That's the benefit of the radio, is that you could just be talking to yourself. Or a million people, you have no idea.
It's not a million people, Jason.
Yeah. Maybe the two people that we reached is just you and I. I don't know. But
Did you say something?
No, I didn't. I actually muted my mic 47 minutes ago at the start of the hour. Talking more about bus drivers and the labor shortages in general, Matt, people are reevaluating now what they're worth in society. And what I'm wondering, what I was thinking when Aaron was talking about these studies about worker productivity increasing with shorter hours, like how does that work for jobs that as a society we would say we need it to be staffed? Like if you're in an office job and you're a salaried worker, you're just getting paid to get your job done. Right? Like you don't really need to work 40 hours a week. You just need to get your project done, whether that's a new program, a service, evaluating something, writing up an Excel report, a Microsoft Word report, whatever. You just need to get the thing done. If it takes 40 hours a week, it takes 40 hours a week. If it takes more, etc. But if you're working in Wegmans is open so many hours and it needs to be staffed so many hours. If you're a bus driver, you got to do so many routes, right? So there are some jobs in society which perverse. It's perverse if you think about it. There are some jobs in society that pay way more than others and don't necessarily need to have as many hours, like the office jobs, right? The office jobs, you just got to get done what you need to get done. And you often make more money than those who have to work more hours often, but get paid less. Those staffing a store, a retail store. Retail stores open 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Someone's got to be there, right, to staff that store so services can operate. So there's like this conflict in the economy of like, what do you do with this tension between jobs that are often paid well but even could have shortened hours versus those jobs that are paid poorly and might require continued hours, high hours. I'm not sure what we do about that.
Well, if we were a society that actually cared about improving the quality of life for everyone, there's a lot we could do. We could more equitably distribute the wealth that is already present in this country. That's just an idea. But because we live in a country that is so rigidly and dementedly attached to the ideals of individuality, of personal success, of striving, it just feels like more and more of a pipe dream every day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking that we don't like. There's got to be some way to thread the needle between you don't need to work 40 hours a week while still getting paid what would now be considered a 40-hour a week wage, right? The bargain isn't, okay, worker, you want to work less? Great, you're gonna work 30 hours a week now, but you're gonna get paid for 30 hours a week. No. That's not the argument nor the bargain. The bargain is, you get paid a 40-hour work salary, but only work 30 hours a week now.
Well, you get paid enough to live your life with, what's the word I'm looking for? With dignity.
Yeah.
And to be able to actually enjoy yourself and also have time to enjoy yourself.
Right. Yeah, you're of course going one step further to say, no, Jason, don't even attach your wage to any hour at all, right? Just attach it to a standard of living, which I, of course, would agree with. I'm just sort of, thinking through this, and also to say, we don't need people to only work the one sort of undesirable potentially job that they have, right? You can divvy that up to spread over more people while still allowing them to have a living wage. Do we need to have so-and-so, store clerks working 5 days a week? I don't know. I'm getting off track here, because we should be spending more time specifically on the Rcsd and the start of the school year. But there's compelling questions to raise about labor in general in the United States, the 40-hour work week, and how labor is valued. The point of going into all of this was sort of to argue, should have just came out in the forefront and said, to make the point of saying, do not jump to the conclusion of blaming bus drivers. Just as anytime there's a teacher strike, do not jump to the conclusion to blame teachers, right? Think about the kids. Think about the kids. Well, why don't you go be a bus driver then? If you want to think about the kids. So that's kind of the point, right? It's to not, and it goes on both sides. Don't just jump to the conclusion, right? And say bus drivers are at fault here. Bus drivers don't care.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to tell people to go do something if, like, I've never really been partial to the argument that, like, oh, you don't like it, why don't you do it? Right.
Well, that's the point, the hypocrisy of it and the cynicism. It's like, of course not. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be a bus driver, right?
Yeah.
Nor do you. And that's why no one's doing it.
I'm not one. $22 a week sounds pretty good.
Right. No. I mean, this is the point of the stumbling that we're having here is the fun and the horror of the capitalist society of like, yeah, how do we fill jobs? And that's always the argument. And you go to socialism. Okay, you want socialism, you want communism. Well, who's going to be your janitor? Everyone's just going to want to sit home then if they don't have to be your janitor. Well, it's the same argument that happens in capitalism. People are just forced to do it. People are just forced to be your janitor, right? And so I don't have an answer for them. I do have ideas about how
I feel like the people who make that argument live in like the battle stations thread on Reddit. It's just like absolute styes. They never clean their apartments.
Yeah, I'm continuing to get off track though on this thread though, but that stuff is fun to talk about though. It's fun to think about, and it's important to think about. I just want to end just recontextualizing about the RCSD though. Again, why this is particularly tricky for the RCSD is not just because again it faces so many systemic barriers, namely poverty, folks. That most of the folks who go to the RCSD live in poverty, which has horrendous outcomes on educational outcomes, but also others, and we need to break up that concentration of poverty. If not, the best way would be to remove the poverty altogether. There are so many systemic issues going on here, not just that the high schoolers in the RCSD would be the only high schoolers in the city of Rochester to not have the option for in-person learning, but the RCSD is sort of caught up with its own transportation structure that's been challenged for decades. The transportation budget for the RCSD is $78 million out of its $986 million budget. So 10% of the RCSD budget, one out of every $10 goes to transportation. So it's a big part of the RCSD budget. I believe that is a higher percentage than other suburban school districts. To the RCSD's credit, in my research for this show, it was much harder to find budgets for other districts in the county, specifically Webster and Penfield. RCSD's budget, very accessible online, very accessible breakdown. Webster, Penfield, not too great, so hard to find the breakdowns, but I believe the RCSD's budget has a greater percentage on transportation than many of the suburban schools. Why is that? Well, the RCSD, of course, is the largest school district, both in land mass and the number of students. The RCSD also has a school choice model, so students are being bused all the way across the city to and fro if they choose their school because it does not have a neighborhood choice system. That changed in the late 90s, early 2000s because of the neoliberal idea that choice is the best inside of every institution that we have. So I'm running out of time here and starting to ramble, but there are a lot of systemic issues that plagues the RCSD, and it doesn't just come out of the latest bus driver shortage. And I hope that we can come together and solve some of those underlying issues like segregation and poverty. But with that, Matt, we've run out of time. We hope that you enjoy your Labor Day weekend. For all of those of you who are laborers out there, remember that your class interests align with other laborers and not necessarily those in the ruling capitalist class who are not laborers like you are. So workers of the world, break off your chains.
Unite.
Play Pokemon Unite.
Yeah.
And have a good time while you're doing it. Folks, thanks for tuning in to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. You can always find our past episodes available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Evidence of Design. I was your host, Jason Taylor, also joined by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
So long.
Have a great weekend out there, everyone. Be well. If you are affected by this RCSD potential delay, thoughts are with you. Take care, and bye-bye.